Hello and welcome everyone. It's back. We're here for the Late League Chat Show, your favorite, hopefully, mildly scuffed, cozy content home for all things LCS. Super Week has occurred, and that's not the right one. There we go. Off to a blindingly good start, as predicted. It was a banger. Surprising, probably no one, given that we're 1 week back on a new patch in a Super Week, which is a lot of words. But that's what happens when you don't have something for a bit. And then you cast a bunch of tournaments that are like 4 patches behind this one. And then LCS happens. And it's a good time. And we have a lot to talk about. Been a stuffed week. Hope you all been doing well. Glad the show is back. It should be more consistent. The plan is to run this every Sunday evening after the LCS. Good vibes, good times. A little more chill, a lot more scuffed. But hopefully it is the content that people out there want. It's at least the content I want. So that's really what matters to me. So let's kick it off with everyone's favorite topic. It is average game time. Because my God, average game time? Probably pretty high. What's the actual average game time, you ask me? I don't know. And I'm not going to check because stats are for suckers. And I'm not in the business of investigating what those are. But I think it's fair to say that, like, the general sentiment has been the games are long and we don't like it. And that's fair. I don't like when games are long either. And I think it's maybe even a bit worse than that, where it's like, it's not just that games are going long. It's like games are long and they're kind of slow. Like, if games are long but really, like, banging, it's kind of great. But that's not what's happening. So, I don't know. I don't like it. I'm not going to sit and complain too much about it. I think basically no one likes it. I will say that when things do start happening in the game, it actually is pretty exciting. So, and I think overall, what the patch has done for the game has been good. I think obviously everyone playing solo queue is very happy. And I do think that having team fights be a bit more meaningful feels pretty good. But the trade-off we made to get to that point is obviously something that, like, probably needs some adjustment. And I do think, and I think people have talked about this as well, that it isn't just everyone's slow, the game's slowed down, everyone's scaling. Like, I don't think that's the only way to play the game, and I think it will change. Like, I think if we played this patch for like a month straight, which I don't think we're going to do, but I think even if we did that, I think, like, the teams would figure it out and speed up. And obviously the fastest regions in the world have already demonstrated that. So I think it is just some overcorrection on the team's parts, because you see a thing, you try the logical thing, which is to slow games down and scale more. And that's kind of what the meta becomes. And I think that will change, like, relatively quickly. I don't think it's too surprising that week 1 of all these major leagues off the back of this patch has been this. And I don't think it will hold up the entire time, and I don't think that would be true even if we kept it the same for like 6 to 8 weeks. I think teams would figure it out. I think there's also a chance that even if that did happen, that, like, it'll change, because I don't think the intention of the patch is to really slow the game down a lot, because so much about League in recent, like, years, like even the last 5+ years, I'd say, definitely the last 2 to 3, has been about speeding up the game. And I think we're going to hit a nice sweet spot, but I think for now it feels a little bit let's say. People aren't all that excited. So, I don't know, man. We'll see. But I think that's just, like, the obvious thing I wanted to talk about, because everyone's complaining about it. And I get it. It's not fun. There's still lots of games that were pretty exciting. Like, TL's games have been exciting, even though they're kind of slow. But TL's always been slow, and I think they've actually been really good on this patch. I think if this is the way teams are going to approach the game, TL are in a very good position. We'll talk about them soon. Not surprising that they're looking good out of the gate. I think that was going to be true in a really fast meta, because they're just very talented, but I think it's extra true in this metagame when everyone's trying to play a bit slower. I think TSM actually have been surprisingly speedy as a team. Definitely been more proactive. I think EG have had good moments of productivity. 100 Thieves are a little bit more on the slower side, which I think is a trend towards their like late season tendencies from spring than necessarily the meta, although obviously the meta is influencing that as well. But I do think that, yeah, this isn't going to last forever. And I have to talk about it. I'm like legally obligated to talk about it because everyone's complaining. So I don't know how everyone else feels. It's cool to see that some of you like slower games. That's really cool. But I think the general consensus is understandably that like early games feel a bit too slow. Nothing wrong with slow games, but they feel a bit too slow. Which brings us to Team Liquid, who are unsurprisingly doing very well. I personally, okay. So I made a power rankings, and I hadn't quite finalized everything in time for the season because that's me. I'm never organized. The fact that this show actually is here right now, if you're listening to it, especially not live, then oh my goodness, that's a big dub for me on a personal level. But I don't have that much faith in Team Liquid, especially come Worlds qualification time, which is like a crazy person thing to say. But that's probably my hottest take of the split. It's a 4-team race, and I think Liquid are going to end up losing, which is a wild thing to say, especially after this week. Like it would have been a ridiculous thing to say before the season started. Now it looks really stupid. But I have the least amount of faith in Liquid of all the big 4 teams, I think. And as we'll talk about, I have too much faith in one of the other teams. So I'm not necessarily looking very smart. But I think early season especially, Team Liquid looking good makes a lot of sense. And for their sake, I hope I'm wrong and that they are one of the teams to qualify for Worlds. When we get to that, that's a long way away at this point. But yeah, there's something about Liquid where it's like, it's just been so many years of trying to make kind of the same thing work. And you can only throw your wallet at the problem for so long before maybe that's no longer the solution. But regular season Liquid's always going to be really good. I think this Liquid is extra good because if the game's going to be a bit slower and a bit more methodical and a bit more team fighty, then I think this is a great meta for Liquid. But to their credit, I think Spring was a lot about them finding ways to speed up the game when they needed to. I think Core and Whipper were really good at that. I think Bjerg can be good at that. So it's not like they only have the option to like scale and that's the only way they play. But I think the game being a bit slower is big thumbs up for Liquid. I think that's something that you dream of that, I think, as Team Liquid. That's kind of what you've trained your whole life for as an organization. That's what they've always been good at. Something Core's excellent at. Something that Bjergsen's really good at too. So Team Liquid have successfully scaled into summer. We shall see how good they are. But they bought some good players. So let me tell you, Team Liquid's really good. Which I feel like I'm only mentioning this because I feel like I was one of the few Team Liquid doubters, and I look silly, and I'm willing to admit to my own silliness. But hey, that's Team Liquid for you. Also, what's up, Handsome Alpha? Hey, Nemsec. And to answer your question, Chloe, I did have a great day. Thank you for asking. Hope you did too. I don't know if it's high, and I explicitly refuse to check the numbers. So I don't know, but everyone was talking about it, so I talked about it. Everyone doesn't like the pace of the game currently. Whether it's actually fast, like slower or not, I have no idea. So I'm sure as a stats person, you can appreciate me blatantly ignoring evidence and just reacting like the good content creator I am, XD. So if I was for one of the best teams in the league out of the gate, and Liquid were always going to be in my top 4, regardless. They're very good. If I was the most wrong about Team Liquid coming into the season, and granted, like, I'm making predictions about the end of the season. I don't think Liquid are going to have a particularly smooth season. I think them being good now makes sense, but I don't think that will last. That is a good reminder. I'll let him know. That's really good, actually. But you're right. Week 1 is often very slow, which makes sense. New patch. Teams are tired. Teams aren't necessarily used to playing again. You know, everything's kind of getting back into place. So anyway, if I was the most wrong about Liquid, or the most doubtful of Liquid, of everyone, which I think is fair. Everyone has Liquid very high. I'm one of the few people that doesn't have them that high. I definitely overdosed on Cloud9 Copium coming into this split. That's been my sin. I have a ton of faith in Cloud9, and I still have faith in Cloud9. Obviously, them starting 0-3 is going to make me look extra stupid, so that's good. But the reason I was so invested in Cloud9, also like I had so much belief in them, is that first of all, I think it is basically, well, it can't be impossible because there's always a chance, but like if you made me pick a Worlds qualifying team from LCS before the split started, I, without thinking, would pick Cloud9. And that basically means I think they're going to be top 3 or better come playoffs, which I don't think is a particularly bold statement, but there's just something about Cloud9 as a team, with one notable exception, to be fair, off the back of their spring win into MSI, kind of not so great performance into that summer where they barely missed. You know, with very few exceptions, Cloud9 do not miss on Worlds, almost ever. So I would have full faith in Cloud9 making Worlds, which means I think they're at least a top 3 team, which I do. I think they're at least a top 3 team. I don't think that's particularly controversial either. What I think is the fact that I think Cloud9 are a lot better than that. I think they're like a number 1 or number 2 team, which is really great to say after a team went 0-3 to start off their Super Week. Now, granted, they had some subs, whatever. And I think the problem now is going to be like Cloud9 were already going to have some troubles integrating a new roster, even though a lot of their pieces are already proven. It's going to take time for Cloud9, and nobody wants to start their summer without their intended starters. And as much as I love King and Destiny, they are not the same players as Berserker and even Sven as a support player. And this is, I guess, is why I had so much faith in Cloud9, is that every single piece of Cloud9 I fully believed in. I didn't think Fudge was going to have any struggles going back to top lane. In fact, I thought he would be instantly like maybe 2x better as a player than a top laner than a mid laner. I think that's probably true. Looking at their games this weekend, I think Blabber is among the best LCS players maybe ever, which is an interesting thing to think about. But Blabber's like maybe a top 10 LCS player of all time. And if that's true, he's probably easily going to have the shortest career of any player in that top 10. So very impressive career on Blabber. His career win rate's like ridiculous, although it keeps getting a bit worse, unfortunately. And I've talked a lot about Blabber in earlier episodes. You can check those out. I have always nothing but good things to say about Blabber. He's still probably a top 3 jungler at least. Is that too much? Got a lot of good junglers in the LCS. This is always the problem. I mean, I have a lot of faith in Blabber to be like among the best junglers like in the league at any given time. And that's still true coming into this split. I have a ton of faith in Blabber. So I believed in Fudge way more than I did as a mid laner, and I think he was a serviceable mid laner. I have a ton of faith in Blabber. He's really good, like among the best players to ever play in the league, in my opinion, at least for his position. Jensen, I also have a ton of faith in. And especially in combination with Blabber, which I know they were both excited for. Jensen comes in and he's like probably a top 3 mid already, and this is in a league where the mid pool was really shallow. And I do think Jensen has struggled a bit more than I thought he would. I think everyone is like, oh, he took a break from the game or whatever. Like, he's not going to be as good. And I just think that's silly. Like, he played a lot. He didn't even take that long of a break. Like, he took a split off, basically. And it's not because he didn't want to play. You know, we've had Doublelift take a split off before, and that's because he was actively burnt out and wanted to try something else. And then he even came back. Jensen wanted to play and his team situation didn't work out. So Jensen is a player that I have maybe more belief in than anyone else in the LCS, actually. So top side looking good. And then the questions are Berserker and Sven, who obviously haven't played yet. Very fair. And getting your team together is going to be tricky. And that was always going to be Cloud9's challenge, which I think why my heavy belief in them is so surprising. But I knew all the pieces were good. Berserker's obviously cracked out of his mind. I think Sven is really good. And he's so smart. He definitely could be a top support player. And he understands what Berserker wants. Like, from his position. Maybe they can't communicate that well, right? That's a hurdle they're going to have to overcome in some ways. But Berserker is so good, so self-sufficient last spring. Granted, Summit is like a good space creator. So, but Berserker was so individually talented and so skilled that like he could do a lot on his own. He was often left in isolated spots, I feel like. And I think Sven is the kind of player that understands what another AD carry wants and can give it to them. So I have a ton of... And Sven's a very experienced, very intelligent player. And he works very, very hard. So no one on Cloud9, despite all the changes, right? 2 role swaps for this team. A player coming back in who's been off for a split. That's a lot of change for a team. But none of the individual pieces I thought were going to fail. It's just a question of how quickly will this team get it together and how good will they be when they get it together. And if they get it together and hit their ceiling or close to, they're going to be a top 3 LCS team. It's pretty easy. If they don't, then they're going to struggle in the regular season and going to have to make a playoff run. And I think starting off 0-3 without your starters even here is definitely looking like a trend in the wrong direction. Now, chat has a good point. Didn't have the easiest of matchups. Definitely true for Jensen. Had to play Jojo, Pyun, and Bjerg. This is one of the problems of being a good team, by the way. Your good matchups come early in your schedule. This is one of those things, I mentioned it actually on air. I don't really talk about it because it's a little bit trivial, I would say. I think it mostly doesn't matter at the end of the day because you play the same opponents same amount of times. But when you play them, it does have some impact. You're a less together, cohesive team at the start of the split. Maybe you hit a bad meta for your team. Maybe you hit a bad stylistic matchup early on when you're still learning how you want to approach the game. Like, these are all little things that do add up. But I think mostly double round robin works out to like put the teams in the correct positions in the regular season. Mostly, I think, serves that purpose. But yeah, Cloud9 are always going to have hard teams because they attract viewers, right? So yeah, unlucky. You have to play good teams in your early games because people want to see you play, and people want to see you play the good teams. So definitely 2 tough games. Obviously losing the Golden Guardians game 2, especially off the back of Golden Guardians getting absolutely clapped on day 1, was a huge surprise. And credit to Golden Guardians for actually looking pretty decent throughout the weekend, although we won't talk about them this episode. I'm sure I'll talk about them in the future. But yeah, Cloud9 are going to take some time to ramp up. Their ceiling is top 3, obviously. I think their ceiling's higher than that. I think they can be a top 1 or 2 team, but whether or not they get there in the regular season is a big question. And then obviously where you're situated in playoffs is going to make a difference in your run. And Cloud9 are likely not going to make the season very easy on themselves, but I still think they'll make Worlds. And this is a really exciting team. This team has a lot of potential. These are some very good international performing players. Berserker obviously hasn't had that opportunity yet, if I'm recalling correctly. But I think Blabber is significantly better international than people have given him credit for. Fudge has been very good international. Jensen has consistently been one of North America's best internationally performing players his entire career. And Sven has also had some excellent international showings. And he's had some smelly ones too. Like, let's be honest. But generally, I think Sven is very good and is an international caliber player. So it's a really exciting team. Like I said, I'm pretty confident I've overdosed on Cloud9 Copium before the split started, and I think I'm coming down off that. But this is a really, really cool team and one we should be excited to watch. and one that for Cloud9 fans' sakes, actually really for everyone's sake, because they're an exciting team, almost always. I hope they recover quickly, but it will not be easy. You are basically trying to play catch up, which is impossible because you are in the middle of the split. Hitting the ground running with like your starting roster feels bad in summer, especially when there is so much on the line. Your goal is to make top 3 for every single LCS team. That is not an easy feat, even if you are already among some of the best teams in the league. And I guess with that, we're at the greatest surprise of the weekend. A welcome, but very surprising, undefeated CLG. Now, granted, this is the opposite in some ways of Cloud9's problem. CLG's matchups were a bit softer on average, based on what we understand from the team strengths coming out of spring, which obviously is not always going to be that accurate. Quite a lot of teams made changes, CLG included. But CLG, man, they're doing it. They're doing the thing. I didn't believe in Dokla, to be perfectly honest with you. I didn't think Jenkins was that bad. I know Jenkins can be a very good player. The people that believe in Jenkins really believe in Jenkins, and those people are smart people. Like, it's not just the peanut gallery trying to convince me. It's not me trying to convince you that Jenkins is good. People much smarter than me convinced me Jenkins was good, and I've seen him play well. I've seen Dokla be pretty good too, but I think it's very easy to write off a player who was pretty meh when he was last in the LCS. People often don't give players another chance. I think Darshan runs into this problem a lot. And granted, Darshan's career is quite a bit longer than Dokla's. He's a bit older. He's been around a very long time. Darshan, in many ways, has proven what he can do, and maybe his ceiling at this point in his career is not enough to break into the LCS, even if he's among the best players in Academy. Darshan has consistently been pretty good. But there is growth. Darshan has experienced a lot of it. Lots of people that have coached or played with Darshan talk about not just his experience bringing a lot to the table, but his desire to continue to become a better player, a better person. And Dokla has gone through that too. I think Contracts has gone through this too, right? This is like kind of the Academy superstar team. That was some of our sell of CLG in spring. It was a lot of these players that we'd wanted to see from Academy. Not necessarily the top prospects, but definitely a team of like Academy players being brought into CLG. But some of those players had been around already. I think everyone's pretty excited about Luger and Poom. Makes sense. Luger and Poom are very exciting, very cool duo in Academy. But people are, Contracts, Palafox, Jenkins, and probably Dokla. But CLG have locked it in, man. They're just playing better. It's not like their approach to this meta has been really good, and they very clearly understand how they want to play the game. And very few teams this early on in the split are going to be that locked in on how they want to play. It takes a long time to adjust. Like, EG are undefeated, but like EG are like loosely undefeated, fam. Like, I think it feels like their individual skill and the team's general talent has kind of carried them to, a handful of games, which is really impressive. And the team will presumably only get better, but like by their own admission, that team has not had a lot of time and doesn't really is still learning how to play the game, where everyone else has had that opportunity for significantly longer than they have, right? But CLG feel really locked in, and I think Prey should go to Contracts and should go to Palafox, who's playing so much better than he has in the LCS, probably ever, actually. Like, Palafox had pop-off games. I think Palafox consistently was a positive for CLG, all 3 games he played. And he's more of a... feels bad, but like more of a role player. But he does this thing where he can have lots of pop-off moments, and then the opposite's true too. Like, the thing about pop-off players is that they tend to have smelly moments too, and Palafox does have some of those. So it's not fair to call him a coin flip player, but he's pretty consistent until he does something, and then that something's usually amazing or like kind of iffy. but not the worst skill set, especially if you are trying to enable your jungler, who is very good when you give him resources and help and can coordinate with him. Your top laner now, who's very obviously wanting to play carries literally every single game whenever it's possible. And of course, your bot lane, who you know can scale, can be amazing team fighters if you give them resources, which makes how CLG won most of their games that much more impressive. Because Luga basically played 2 supports, one farming, one not, in 2 of their games, and won. And then played Sivir, who is not a greedy AD carry, and managed to continue to contribute. Like, the big question was, okay, Dokka's joining this team. This team feels kind of strained for resources. Who is going to give some up? And I think it was clear that Palafox would be willing to, and he has done a great job of enabling his team. I think the other thing about Palafox that I really like is that he's always got the meta picks dialed in. He's the only player to play Tillier in mid in the LCS. He's probably the best looking Tillier that we've seen so far. And it doesn't really surprise me because one of his coaches is Damonte, who was also known for being dialed in on meta picks. I remember offhand Damonte said something to me like, yeah, I don't get why people don't try the new champions. They usually OP. I'm paraphrasing, but that's, if from memory, that's basically what he said. And it, like, that matters. Like, being willing to play things that are good and not being afraid to pull them out and practice them and put in the work is like a real skill that quite a few pro players don't tend to flex, even though it's one of the easier things to do because it's usually pretty obvious what the good stuff is. And yes, sometimes it's just good in solo queue and it won't translate. Sometimes it doesn't translate to your style, it doesn't translate to your team style. Like, there are reasonable limitations for why certain champions, even if they're obviously good, especially if they're really good in solo queue, don't get played in pro. But Palafox is not a player that's scared of those things. I love that about him. I've already said Contract's playing well. Luga's a beast. I think Dokka's been surprisingly good. But my hero of CLG is actually Poom. That man's is so good on enchanters. And I know he likes Lulu. He even picked it quite a lot in spring. But if we're in an enchanter meta, Poom might be the guy. Like, his play is kind of keeping all of CLG's shenanigans together, you know? We got Luga that can play supportive or play carry. We got Dokka that always wants to carry. We got Contracts, nice and aggressive. We got Palafox wanting to go in with his team, wanting to coordinate, roam around, be aggressive, help start things, help be there, and send it whenever the team wants to go. And Poom is just vibing, positioning well, baiting people in on his enchanters, consistently healing, laning well. Like, Poom knows what's up in this meta, it seems like. Super impressive to watch Poom play enchanters. I think by the eye test, the best player of enchanters so far in the LCS. It's only 1 week, but Poom's been really impressive, and I think did win a player of the game, but has maybe not got the attention that he deserved. Just my opinion. Maybe not true, but maybe. But yeah, CLG, a very nice surprise. I know the CLG fans are very happy. I'm happy for you CLG fans. You needed something. I'm glad you got this. So EG, another surprising 3-0. Definitely people would have, I think people would like, if you're predicting who's going to go undefeated, I think most people would say Team Liquid. No one would say CLG. And like maybe half the people would say EG. So EG doing this well feels like a surprise. And I'm really impressed that they just kind of like ground it out and like they want neat wins. Like you could, like we talked a lot about how tired this team is and how little of a break they've had because it's true and they talk about it themselves. But man, oh man, do they just go for it. And this team will obviously get better as the season goes on. The big worry with EG is that they will burn out because they're going for it. Like I think the best thing for EG, because there's a break in the middle of the split now, which is new. I think the best thing for EG is that like they go undefeated in the first 4 weeks. I think the breaks between weeks 4 and 5, if I remember correctly. But I think the hope is that they like go undefeated or close in the first 4 weeks, can finally take a break, and then build up enough of a buffer that they can be a little more lax moving in the playoffs and go again and really knuckle down when that comes back around. It's going to be this split for EG is going to be a testament to their like ability to grind and their tenacity. The talent is there, like very clearly. Ezreal meta, oh baby, Danny is so effing good at Ezreal. And he's been playing really well. Vulcan's been playing. I mean, this whole team's good. I don't need to tell you how good this team is. We all know. What I do need to tell you is that Inspired's playing like a cracked fiend, which is good. Good to see Inspired still on form. Looked good at MSI. Looked good at the end of spring. Looks real good now. Impact, I agree. Probably still underrated. And definitely a player. Definitely an LCS great. Really, really good player. But let me tell you, friends, I think I spent a lot of time on this channel. A lot of time talking about how much I love Tukoi. And I still love Tukoi. I think Flacco is actually really good. In fact, Flacco's being absent from this show is kind of interesting, because I think I was originally planning on talking about them and then other stuff came up. But love me some Tukoi. I think criminally underrated in spring. And perhaps his all-pro vote kind of undid some of that, which is good. He's really good. And mid, as we know, was pretty shallow. And it's still pretty shallow in the LCS, unfortunately. Jensen being in, good. Really good for the mid lane pull in the league, but still very top-heavy, I would say. And that's been true for pretty much the entire Jensen, Bjergsen reign in the LCS. So along comes old mate Jojo. Jojo's good. But I don't think I ever put enough attention into how good really is Jojo Pyun. Let me tell you, after watching my mans compete internationally and play this weekend and run it down a tiny bit in certain spots, Jojo Pyun's fucking absurd. It for some reason never clicked for me how ridiculous his hands are. But that's the only thing I could stop yelling about when I was watching games over the weekend in the studio. It was him versus Arbor that really did it. His LeBlanc into Ari. First of all, Sugar, that's all kill. He's a Muppet, but that's fine. Everyone makes mistakes. He got hit by 2 chumps that I could see on camera. First one killed him because he's an idiot, and that's fine. He made the right play and then didn't finish the play. And then made a silly but potential play that was very risky, and he got punished. And he ate one other charm that was actually really good by Arbor. I think it was like a predictive charm almost from a distortion. But I think that was it. He dodged like every skill shot in the game. His movement is so clean. And like I saw him lane well. Like I saw him beat people up on Victor in like the kind of control mage centric meta of spring. But his laning is unreal. And I guess watching him on a champion where you can really flex that laning ability like LeBlanc, especially that kind of matchup, like LeBlanc vs Ari is all skill. You know, it's LeBlanc definitely has initiative in that matchup, but that's all skill, that matchup. You know. And watching Jojo just completely lane the pants off Avadaga was nuts. And then he even played well in the mid game. And I think, to your point, Nimsec, yeah, he did some throwing in the mid to late game. And I think he's cleaned that up quite a lot already and will continue to get better. I thought the hype for Jojo was too high. And then he won the split. And I'm like, okay, Maybe I was wrong. And then he went to MSI and played really well. And then he comes back to LCS after being very tired of MSI and filming content with us and being a generally agreeable fellow with not a lot of time on his hands because he's a new LCS champion. That happens. You don't get a lot of time after spring, as it turns out. And he's just ridiculous. And so the JoJo I was sold was ridiculously hyped. I think he's lived up to that hype now. The next level of JoJo is some like ridiculous, just some ridiculous player. And I'll give credit where it's due to Cubby, who is always tweeting about this. This is a generational talent, like a once in a generation, once in a lifetime. This is like a very rare player. This is. I talk a lot about how much I love Blabber and how rare he is as a player. JoJo is probably that for NA mids, which is really impressive because, as we know, NA mid hasn't been all that good. At least native mids. Obviously, Bjergsen and Jensen are NA mids, by the way. It's fine. So yeah, EG are really good. I'm very worried that they're going to get burnt out, but from the sounds of things, hearing their performance coach, who was incredible in her interview on stage, knowing the infrastructure around that team, knowing what they did already, right? They built a championship winning team with a sophomore and a rookie that people didn't really believe in. After doing very well and obviously wanting to win. And yet they can do even more. So I think EG will know how to manage this team, know how to manage all this stuff, but really impressive. Really impressive from EG and JoJo in particular. JoJo has gotten my vote. He is like, yeah, he's going to have a split. That's for sure. It's very fitting that JoJo's breakout split might be this one, which is a really funny thing to say about a player that just won an LCS title in his first split ever. But his like, the split where everyone gets it, where everyone's like, oh, he is that good. It's probably going to be this summer. And the fact that he's going to do that in a split where Bjergsen and Jensen are now back in the league, who are no slouches from the mid lane, is really cool. So very excited for EG. But they're playing crazy good for a team that is unbelievably tired, I'm sure. So I don't know how they do it. I love them for it. I'm excited for them. And I did also think EG would not finish that high in the regular season. I think they definitely finished in top 4. But I thought they would not get near the top because I thought they would be tired and they have not been the strongest regular season team anyway. We'll see if that changes. I think good money says that EG will sneak into a comfy playoff spot, but not the top 2, and still look very good and have a shot at defending their title. But who knows? Who knows? Which brings us to our final topic of the show. Everyone's favorite jungler. It's TSM Spica. TSM have not had the best year. Let's to say it lightly. Obviously not a great spring for the defending MVP. Not the best opening for TSM. They did win a game. That's good. It's nice when TSM wins. The fans like that. We like when the fans like our show. Spica's like definitely not the jungle he was, right? He has very stiff competition. I'm not trying to say Spica is like underrated and should be like, you know, one of your top 2 junglers. He's not. He's probably still towards the top 5, maybe even in it, but he's not the best jungler in the league, and that's okay. But he's playing really well, even in TSM's losses. And it is just nice to see a player like Spica feel more like his old self. Feels like Spica has been unlocked more already, which is very promising for TSM. And I know Path was out there with his tweets, and I loved him for it. And he believes that TSM are still in the top 5 conversation. And I think there's generally been a lot of talk of the, you know, top versus bottom 5 in LCS, because it does sometimes feel like there are 5 teams that invest a lot and want to win, and there are 5 other teams. And the league does kind of have this polarity to it in some ways. And TSM should still be one of those elite teams in that conversation, spending the money, making their investments, trying to build championship winning teams. But when TSM basically had to completely rebuild around Spica, people were excited because he was the defending MVP. And people were very quickly unexcited because holy shit, were TSM games hard to watch last spring. But Spica right now at least is playing really well. And they obviously haven't won all the games, even though Spica's played well in all of them. I think Spica is leading probably in like the rival category. If you don't know what this is, we introduced this somewhat recently. I think last split. We have player of the game every game. I don't know. I hope you know that if you watch the LCS. But if you don't, there's a player of the game every single game from the winning team. And we introduced the idea that I believe Flowers got from Core, who did it in the in-houses that he was running. But the idea that, like, if we want to honor a player on the losing team, and don't have to do it, this isn't like we always have one of these. But if we want to honor a player on the losing team, we call them the rival. And it's the best player on the losing team. And I think Spica has won that like multiple times already this weekend. I'd have to double check that. I don't know that for sure. But like, Spica is getting the attention he, I think, deserves, even though he's not on a winning team right now. But Spica is the kind of player that people should be excited for. And I think got a pretty shit hand after the highest point in his career. Winning MVP off the back of a championship win. The split before, if I'm remembering correctly. And that, he barely missed Worlds. Actually, they didn't win. Never mind. Cut that part out of the VOD. He didn't win. But, he won in 2020. With TSM, had been looking good. MVP regular season split, just missed the cutoff at Worlds. TSM get heartbreak at 4th, coming into Worlds that summer in 2021. So like, Spica was near the peak of his career, right? He was in the conversation for like, he was the best jungler actually in the regular season. That's why he won MVP. And this is with Closer and Blabber popping off in most of the games. Blabber especially looking so fearsome. And again, the jungle pool being very deep in North America. It's one of the weird quirks of the region, I guess. But yeah, I'm really happy Spica's doing well. He sounds like he's doing better from his interview that he had after their win today. Spica is a player that should be as exciting as these other NA talents you all like now. And I hope you like them now. Because you should. They're very exciting. But I think Spica was quickly written off after things likely out of his control. And he's now playing really well. And that's good for everyone. Spica's really good, and we should want him to succeed. And I hope he does personally, because he's a player that's very exciting to watch when he's on form. And he is now the face of one of the largest esports teams in the world. That is a lot to take in as still a pretty young player. TSM is not a small team. So, it's cool. It's cool to see Spica doing well. It's cool to see him popping off on people and playing aggressive. That's the other thing too, man. We started this off talking about the game time. Games being slow. Spica ain't slowing down, baby. He's going for it. I love it. And that's our show. I hope you enjoyed it. You can hit the follow button. If you're here on Twitch, hit the subscribe button. If you're here on YouTube, as I believe these will be going up on the internet for your viewing and listening pleasure. Wherever you are, I hope you enjoyed it. I've had a lot of fun. We'll be back every Sunday as always. Always, he says, knowing that he's definitely not going to miss one like the last split. We've had fun. I'll catch you all later. Thanks for listening.